All right, welcome everyone to the Zojo webinar. I am Paul Lefebvre, the Zojo Developer Evangelist. And our webinar topic this time is a Q&A for FoxPro developers. And I am joined by special guest Kevin Cully, a noted FoxPro developer and FoxPro expert. Welcome, Kevin.
Hello, everybody.
All right, well, before we kick in, I'm going to just give a little bit of highlights of what Zojo is, and then we'll go through a few questions and see how things roll. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about Zojo. Why Zojo? What is Zojo? Zojo is a full-featured application development tool. It lets you create desktop apps for OS X, Windows, and Linux. And I know Kevin is a big Linux fan. He's actually connected to us right now from Linux. Zojo can also create web apps, iOS apps, and that's a lot of apps. Zojo also has a wide variety of database support. You can connect to all these databases. These are pretty common ones: SQLite, MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, SQL Server. And of course, you can use ODBC to connect to anything that you have a driver for. And Zojo has support to connect to web services, which is another common way to talk to databases and other things. And if you want to see a demo of a web app made in Zojo, you can head on over to this URL at our Zojo Cloud website, and we have a kind of an online demo of a customer order system that you can see how that might look, and you can play around with it and add some stuff to orders and things like that. Zojo also includes over 350 example projects. So you download Zojo and play around with it. You get a lot of stuff to take a look at. So certainly you can jump right in and start running projects and seeing how things work. And for all the details on Zojo, you want to head over to the Zojo Dev Center. That's developer.zojo.com, which has all the documentation, videos, and materials you need to learn more about Zojo. Common thing that's asked by people looking at Zojo and after coming from other tools is Zojo's pricing. And Zojo essentially has multiple price points, all the way from $99 to $19.99. But our most popular one is the Zojo Pro package, which is $6.99, if I remember the pricing correctly. When you purchase Zojo, you get quarterly updates for 1 year. And the big thing about Zojo is you get to continue using it after the license expires. Unlike some development tools, you no longer get to use the tool when your license expires. That's not the case with Zojo. You can continue using it, you just will no longer get updates. And if you decide you do want updates at some point, you can just renew your license at any point, and then you're eligible again for the updates. There's no penalty for delaying or anything like that. Zojo is licensed per developer, pretty much like most development tools. And your end users do not need a license of any kind. The only one that needs a license is the developer, and they can build as many apps as they want and distribute them and do whatever they need. All right, now, Kevin, welcome. It's your turn. You get your very own slide.
So, yeah, been a long time FoxPro developer, probably started FoxPro development in like 1990, 92 or 93. And I've been doing FoxPro development ever since. And
So that's before it was Microsoft, right?
Right before Microsoft bought it.
Okay.
I was doing FoxPro 2.0 for DOS. And then right after I started, Fox Software came out with a version of FoxPro. And I think you'll find this of interest for Zojo developers, that FoxPro ran on DOS, Windows, Mac, and SCO Unix that year. So that version of FoxPro was designed to be cross-platform, just like Zojo is. And in fact, if you kind of look behind the covers of the FoxPro engine, you'll see remnants of that history, that there's cross-platform fields in the tables that make up the projects and screens and so on. Now, with Visual FoxPro, Microsoft put out Visual FoxPro in 1995, and they came out with a version for Windows and Mac. But then that was the last version for the Mac, was 1995 version 3. In 1996, they came out with 5, and so on and so forth through Visual FoxPro 9. The last service pack was in 2009, and a year or so back, Microsoft released the parts of Visual FoxPro that are written in Visual FoxPro. All that's open source, but the part of Visual FoxPro that's written in C is still closed source.
Uh-huh.
So it's kind of amazing the parallels between FoxPro and Xojo. A lot of FoxPro's written in FoxPro. A lot of Xojo's written in Xojo. FoxPro had a cross-platform history, even though that kind of fell by the wayside. Xojo's, I would say Xojo's key strength is cross-platform development, especially, with the Raspberry Pi recently.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
So, as I'm having our Atlanta Xojo users group meetings, which has some FoxPro developers attending, and I'm presenting on Xojo saying, hey, I love FoxPro, and if you love FoxPro, take a look at Xojo as well. I think the transition from FoxPro to Xojo is kind of a very natural transition. It's not like going from FoxPro to Python or C or something that might be more of a dramatic change.
Right.
I find it's forms in Windows and projects and object-oriented programming, methods, events, and properties, and that's where Visual FoxPro is, and that's where Xojo is and was. So the migration's natural. So then getting to what you're showing on the screen is, some people are saying, it's like, well, is there a FoxPro to Xojo converter? And I said, well, no, but then it started kind of churning in my head, and I get these kind of thoughts in my head. I'm like, what would that look like? And sometimes I just can't let it go. And so originally I said, well, the code is different enough that let me just do a visual converter, and let me just convert a FoxPro window into a Xojo window. And so that's how I started. And then I, to get it really running, you need the project to kind of wrap around it. So I, converted a FoxPro project into a Xojo project. And then, of course, somebody, I'm demoing the converter, and they're like, that's great. Does it convert the code? I'm like, well, no. But then all of a sudden I started thinking about that. And, so then I created a very rudimentary FoxPro to Xojo code converter, and you can kind of see that. That's kind of longer, thinner window.
Which is good for people to see. You can see kind of the syntax differences here, and in this particular example, you can see pretty obviously, the code flow and everything like that. It's not really that different.
No. I mean, look how similar it is, actually. You're declaring variables, with a dim instead of a local. Your if statement in FoxPro, the then is optional.
The then is optional in Xojo as well, actually.
Oh, I thought it was required.
No, I'm pretty sure it's optional.
You might want to check that.
No, maybe
it's required.
No, I take that back. It's optional when you do the pound if conditional stuff.
Right. Okay. Right. The precompiled, and right. So the precompiled syntax is very similar to FoxPro. In the ifs, in FoxPro, it's end if, all one word, and in the precompiled Xojo language, it's end if, all one word. But in the Xojo language, it's end space if.
Right, and the if is optional there on that part.
Yeah, that it is. And then the return is the same. And so now, that being said, The way that FoxPro handles data is very unique to FoxPro and kind of the DBase languages.
Right, because
And
FoxPro has an integrated database, right?
yes. Right. So FoxPro is both a language and a database. And I haven't recommended FoxPro as the database really since like the mid 1990s because the SQL databases are superior.
Hmm.
So, but you can think of the FoxPro databases kind of like the equivalent of the SQLite to Xojo. It just kind of naturally works. It's built in. You don't really need a plugin. It's wicked fast. Now, obviously there's differences, but FoxPro's way of manipulating data it can't be beat. It has this concept of cursor, which is like an in-memory database. You have the complete SQL tools in FoxPro itself. So I can, as an example, I can create a connection to an Oracle database, and I pull that back into a cursor, where Xojo would pull that back into a record set. Well, in FoxPro, I can then turn around on that cursor and then sub-select it, and then which results in another cursor.
Right.
And I can sub-select that cursor into another cursor, and so on and so forth. And I can do that as many times as I want, within an absurd reason. And that's how FoxPro coders do a lot of their reports. Is
right. They grab a bunch of data and they keep kind of shriveling it down until they get exactly what they
That's
want.
right. I call it that they're pounding on it. They're just taking a meat mallet to it and forcing it to be exactly what they want. And then what FoxPro developers will do is right at that last moment, they'll ask the user, where do you want your data? Do you want it in a report? Do you want it in Excel? Do you want it in HTML or XML or JSON or, something else? And then the user will make a choice and it'll spit it out that way. So it's very, very powerful. And of course, a lot of people choose Excel because then they can further manipulate it where maybe the application didn't handle, some exclusion, right? Or some weird sorting choice.
Right. All right. Well, before we go too far down that path, let's take. I want to just touch base here on. So the two screenshots you see here are two open source projects that Kevin has created to help you essentially migrate some of your FoxPro stuff over to Xojo that might help you translate a project a little more easily. And as you mentioned, it doesn't do a full conversion of any stretch. And in general, converting between one language to another is never going to be something that's 100% going to work anyway.
Right. So one of the keys is that in that VFP converted to Xojo window in the lower right, that checkbox at the bottom, comment out your code that is converted. So that I think is actually a really powerful feature. So your code gets converted over, but it's commented out because it just won't work. But you've got to you're going to have to revisit your methods and events.
Yeah, the big benefit is you now have that code inside Xojo, so it's easy to reference.
That's right. Your method and events are named the same.
Right.
So then you pick through it, and then you kind of Xojoify. See, I just created a verb. You Xojoify your methods, but at least all your code was there, and you can just kind of slowly go through that and handle the different ways, typically of how you're going to address your data. And then you make it work, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, you're up and running in Xojo, and it's a wonderful thing.
All right. Well, we'll start to hit some of the questions that have been sent in, and one of the ones here is kind of a really, really broad question. So I don't know how specifically we'll be able to answer it, but the question is, what's it like to develop in Xojo? Now, obviously, I know the answer to that, and I haven't done much, if any, FoxPro development. I've had, back when I was doing consulting, I had several projects that I got that were to convert a FoxPro project over to Xojo. But the way I did them was essentially is I replicated the functionality in Xojo, and I didn't reuse any code or anything like that. I would reuse screen designs and stuff, but I still recreated everything in Xojo.
Right.
But in general, for someone who's used FoxPro for a while, what's it like to develop using Xojo?
Well, so the last major release of Visual FoxPro is in 2009. So kind of the style at which people develop screens and programs in the IDE have evolved. And so when you show a FoxPro developer the Xojo IDE,
which I'm going to do now while you're talking, by the way.
Okay, yeah. So, you know, typically when somebody asks what it's like, I fire up Xojo just like you're going to do. And typically I start up a desktop project, right? Because that's what they're used to. And I say, hey, your project's on the left, and your library is on the right, and you're designing a screen in the middle. And they're like, I get that. That makes sense. And I say, here's how you add a window. Here's how you add a menu. Here's how you add a class. Here's how you, right. So, okay. So you're dragging and dropping controls. People get that with FoxPro. It's all the same. They love the layout alignment guides. We do not have that in FoxPro.
They help me position things and make sure things stay
That's right. Now we have the alignment buttons like you've got at the top there, where you can select multiple objects and say, align left, align top, align bottom.
Right.
We have that, but we don't have those alignment guides, and the FoxPro developers love that. So again, 5 minutes of demoing Xojo, that question is answered. Right, so they're going from an unknown, maybe they haven't ever seen Xojo before, to 5 minutes later saying, yeah, I can handle that. I can develop a Xojo app. I'm used to dragging and dropping controls and setting actions. I tell them, what in FoxPro, what was the click event is the action event in Xojo.
Right, and we can show you that here. So if I go to the add button, I can add what are called event handlers. You can see there's a bunch. Yep. It would be the Xojo equivalent. And this is what starts to bring up the code editor where you can type things.
Right. And so that part, they're like, yeah, okay, action, click equals action. Got it. And so, not a lot of pushback on that. That's a pleasant surprise. And you wouldn't believe how many other languages are actually, Paul, you would believe how many other languages make it hard to start designing a screen.
Right. Well, that's one thing we really try to make easy for people with Xojo is there's not a lot of stuff. You don't have to fill out pages and pages of wizards or go through all this stuff before you're ready to just, boom, start making your app. And then you start right at the window layout. Then you can drag your stuff on it, quickly switch to the code editor, quickly hit run, and then Xojo's very fast and builds your app for you to test it.
Right. And I forgot what the law was called, but I love this saying is that all successful complex applications begin as successful simple applications. And, that just rings true for me. And, I can see that you can start a simple Xojo application and have it solve a problem, and then you grow it. And there may be times where you have to refactor it, but I think it's called Wilson's Law or something.
I haven't heard it, so I can't offer any tips. But.
Yeah, I just love that saying, that all successful complex applications begin as successful simple applications.
Right, and in the case of Xojo, right now we just have the single default window that's here, but you can add all kinds of things to your project. Xojo, of course, is fully object-oriented, so you can add classes.
Right.
You can add all kinds of other things to help work on your layout, menus, toolbars, stuff like that, modules for more global things. You can add folders to organize things. You can open up stuff in different tabs. So as your project gets larger, it's a little easier to work with things.
And So then after that initial showing them of a desktop application, I'll typically show a FoxPro developer how to build a web application, because some FoxPro developers stopped at desktop applications, and they, it may have been their dream about creating a web application. And one of the screens in my presentations are, to develop a web application, you've got to learn all this stuff. You got to learn HTML, you've got to learn CSS, you've got to learn some JavaScript, libraries like Angular, JS, and so on, and that graphics and this and that. And I show them how to develop a Xojo web application and how similar it is to developing a desktop application. And you certainly see that light bulb moment.
Right. Yeah.
For a
with
lot
Zojo,
of them,
you don't have to learn all that stuff. You just
that's right. And
right.
And so FoxPro developers love code reuse. They love developing business objects. And I say, well, you can reuse your business objects within reason, if they're designed properly. You can reuse your business objects on the web applications and use that same business object on a desktop application. And that rings true for them. That gets them excited as well.
Here's a simple web app that essentially replicates that very simple desktop app. Same exact code, same layout, same message box. A lot of similarities that makes it easy to work with. Yeah,
a lot of times when I'm doing the demo web application, I'll have I'll have a text box for a first number and a text box for a second number, and then the text changed event fires, and I call a method that adds those two together and then sets like a results label.
Right.
To 1 + 2 is 3, and you change. On the web application, you change one of the numbers to a 10, and so 1 + 10 is 11. And they see that, and in 5 minutes, I've developed a web application that would have been daunting if you were not a web application developer and didn't know Angular JS and these responsive design elements. And 5 minutes, I'm done. Or 5 minutes, I'm on my way, I should say.
Yeah, well, you've gotten started. You're not, stumped before you even begin the project.
That's right. And again, start simple with good success, and then I can build complexity from there.
All right. Well, that's all good things. So that, as Kevin's noting, Zojo and I mentioned at the beginning, Zojo makes desktop apps, makes web apps, and of course, it can also make iOS apps. All readily available here from the little project chooser that appears when you first start Zojo, and they all operate very similar with a layout that you can drag your controls onto. So it should be pretty straightforward, as Kevin has noted, for a FoxPro developer to take a look at Zojo, get a feel for it really, really quickly, and maybe even start to try a few things and get apps up and running probably a lot faster than they might have thought.
Yeah. I was speaking about Zojo at a conference that had a lot of FoxPro developers earlier this month. And my presentation was given from a Raspberry Pi. So I asked the organizer, I said, when was the last time somebody did a presentation from a desktop computer, and did that desktop computer cost $40? And so he said, it's been years since somebody brought in a desktop computer and it cost thousands of dollars. And what I presented was a FoxPro application that I used my converter to convert into Zojo. I kind of fixed it up on my Linux desktop, compiled it to Raspberry Pi, used SyncThing, which is like Dropbox, and send it over to my Raspberry Pi, and then ran that desktop application on the Raspberry Pi. And in the title, it said, formerly a FoxPro program.
Right, and for people to see how easy it is to take your desktop apps and make them run. Right now, I'm running, this is the Mac version. But Xojo itself runs on Windows and runs on Linux. And on any of those platforms, you can build for any of the other platforms. So on Mac, I can build for Windows and Linux right now. And if I wanted to do that, I would just check the boxes here. And I can click on the Linux box to see the settings. And I could say, you know what? I want to build for the Raspberry Pi. So I'm going to set it to build for 32-bit ARM. And that's generally it. You often don't have to change much else. You just build your app, copy it over, run it, just like Kevin did.
Yeah, they loved. I mean, they loved that. They loved the, obviously it's cross-platform, but then cross-platform on a budget. Yeah, they like that a lot.
All right. So another question that has come up here is it possible to connect a Xojo app to use FoxPro Data?
The answer unfortunately is no, because you can use Xojo to connect via ODBC, but the last FoxPro ODBC driver that Microsoft put out was for FoxPro version 6, which almost nobody uses.
So that's old.
That's very old. Visual FoxPro 6 was released in 1998.
That's pretty old.
So, still, there are applications in use. Unfortunately, Microsoft never released an ODBC driver for Visual FoxPro 9, which kind of would have brought them to a modern state. I've always this is another thought that just keeps spinning in my head, is that at some point I'd love to create a Visual FoxPro server that maybe takes a web service hit, or maybe has some type of exposed API.
Yeah, definitely.
So that you could run FoxPro and FoxPro Data in maybe a virtual machine, and then have Xojo or any other language talk to the API or hit the web service. And
in general, that's a great idea, just because that's how a lot of apps are being built this time, and it would also allow you to access that stuff from iOS apps more easily.
Yeah, right. So cross-platform, it's like, as long as you can get to it, then all of a sudden all your FoxPro data and all this history that these FoxPro developers have been working decades on is now still relevant, and you're hitting it from the web or the iOS or the Raspberry Pi, or you name it. Even from another website, you could hit the web service and be reading and writing FoxPro data.
Right.
Again, it's been kicking around my head. I don't think I'll do it, but maybe I'll be foolish enough to take that on as a project.
Now, what about FoxPro SQL data?
Well, so if your data is in some type of SQL data, then Xojo talks great to that, almost no matter what it is. So if you've built, like I had a FoxPro application that read, did the CRUD operations against a Postgres database. So, it was reading and writing to the Postgres database. So I created a Xojo application that did the read and write to the Postgres data. And they kind of ran in parallel and complemented each other. So that's not a problem. So Xojo talks to Microsoft SQL Server and Oracle and MySQL and Postgres. There's, I think, an open source plugin for MongoDB, and of course, the ODBC driver covers almost everything else, right? So, so getting to data that you used to access in FoxPro is not a problem. And like I said, I haven't recommended using FoxPro as a database since the late 90s, maybe. And
I know on the FoxPro projects that I ended up migrating to Xojo years ago, that they did have a data component that, if I recall correctly, I migrated to SQLite using the ODBC driver. So I wrote like a little tool that would essentially copy the data out of FoxPro, and I used an ODBC driver, so it must have been the FoxPro native format. And then I copied into a SQLite database and just worked with it from that point.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, there's all different ways of getting data into SQLite. You can connect to SQLite via ODBC driver from FoxPro and just push your data in.
Mm.
You can export your data out of FoxPro into like comma separated value or SDF format, and then import that into SQLite, kind of as a two-step process. There's all different ways. Um, FoxPro has what they call an upsizing wizard, so you can upsize your FoxPro data to. Obviously, Microsoft made it easy for Microsoft SQL Server to be the target database, but you can do other databases. On one of the FoxPro mailing lists called ProFox, um, that's at leaf.com, leafe.com. It's hosted by Ed Leaf. In their downloads section there, they have FoxPro code snippets. There's upsizing code snippets for various databases. I've written a lot of those, and they're open source code there that you can download and kind of upsize data from FoxPro to MySQL and FoxPro to Postgres, and so there's tools out there to make it easier to get done.
Mm-hmm. All right. That was a database question. Another question that's on here, that are kind of related, is can you develop large applications using Xojo? And perhaps also maybe somewhat related is what applications would I know that have been made using Xojo? And well, I'll touch on that on a high level to say, well, you can certainly make large applications with Xojo. It doesn't have a limit on the size of applications, and as shown, the tool, supports projects that have lots of stuff in it. In fact, the Xojo IDE, what we're looking at right now, all of this is made using Xojo itself. So this is an example of a pretty large, complex, powerful application that is made using Xojo. There are tons of Xojo-made apps in the Mac App Store, in the iOS App Store that are sold. Not a lot of them publicize that they're built with Xojo, not that apps generally publicize what tools they're built with. There are also a lot of people that use Xojo for consulting to create apps for their clients. And in that case, you're not going to really hear about them, much like FoxPro consultants. You generally aren't allowed to publicize apps you've built for clients. But a lot of people and a lot of apps have been made using Xojo. I'm certain a lot more than you might think.
Yeah, when you're at the XDC conference, the Zojo Developers Conference, you talk to some of the people there, and they're like, "Yeah, I've got hundreds of windows and hundreds of classes and hundreds of modules," and it's like, wow, it's interesting to hear about that high end, and so that's on par with FoxPro, the Visual FoxPro. There's developers that have hundreds of windows and hundreds of classes. And so when people ask me, can I handle a large project? I say yes. The bottom line is a one-word answer. Yes, it can.
Yeah, absolutely. And Xojo has, a text-based file format that's particularly useful with large projects. So each project item saved as its own individual file. And that's the sort of thing that works wonderful with source control systems like Subversion or Git, that are commonly used with large projects that have multiple people working on them, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's definitely a benefit of Xojo over FoxPro, because FoxPro, a lot of the FoxPro binary format, for instance, the projects and the screens and the reports, that is stored in a FoxPro table. Mm. So you can open them up in FoxPro as if it was data, even though it's a project, or open it as data, even though it's a screen or a window. And that made it very hard when these, the Git and Mercurial and Subversion, they came along, and they really need that text-based format for comparisons. That's really made it hard on FoxPro developers to kind of move into the modern world that way.
Yeah. And let me just open up real quick here. It's not that this is a large application by any stretch, but one that actually has more stuff in it. Go to our many example projects, and this is kind of a reference app we include with Xojo. And this connects to a database, a SQLite database. And you can see it has a few more things in it than just the sample one. And you can start to see how you're able to organize your projects with folders and access things and, open up a bunch of things in tabs as you're working on them, that sort of thing. And view code.
Yeah, I show off the Eddie's Electronics application a lot when people ask me, what can I do? And
yeah, this is a great one for people to look at because we have the desktop version of Eddie's Electronics. There's a web version as well, and there's also an iOS version. So it allows you to compare and contrast how they're all built and the similarities and how you can make apps for different things, which kind of transitions to a little bit another question. People that use FoxPro are primarily going to be using Windows, right? Because that's what it runs on.
That's right.
So
yep.
The question is, how hard is it to transition to making apps that run on Mac or even Linux?
Yeah, again, when I get that question, I typically have my laptop out and I'm showing them Xojo. So then of course, I'm running on Linux already, but I show them what it would take if they're running on Windows to build for Linux and or the Mac or any of the other target platforms, or obviously you got to build a different project for the web or iOS. But I show them it's pretty simple, and then I show them if there is a difference for the platform, I show them the pre-compiling differences for the target platforms, and again that makes sense for them. It's like if you need something for Mac, then it's pound if target Mac.
Right, yeah, if you need specific code. If you just need the build, you just check the box here. One
Right.
thing I do like to point out to people, because if you're comfortable with Windows, by all means, you can use Xojo on Windows and do all your development there. If you are intending to ship a Mac app, however, don't think that you can just, ignore the Mac completely and, just check the box here on Windows and build a Mac version and then, send it out there. I mean, everyone needs to test their stuff, right? So you're probably going to want a Mac somewhere to at least run it once or a few times to make sure that things look the way you expect. And of course, Mac users tend to be at times pickier than users of other platforms. So sometimes you may want to adjust or make accommodations for that.
Right. Which leads me into talking about the remote debugger,
Yes.
which is kind of a unique tool to Zojo and very different to the FoxPro developers, but it kind of assuages their any nervousness about cross-platform development. And you can say, well, you can step through your code on Windows while it's running on the Mac, and very, very powerful.
Yeah, and let's do a quick thing here. I think I can show. Let's set a breakpoint here on this line of code and run this. Oh, can't find the database. It's probably because I didn't save the project. So let's open the project up directly. That way the database file will be linked properly. So I set a breakpoint. I just click over here. It makes a red dot. That's called a breakpoint. And you can see the app running here. And if I click on an invoice and click the button, that will hit the breakpoint because this line of code was now run and we're now in the debugger. And what Kevin's talking about is the remote debugger, which allows you to debug code that's running on a different machine. So if you're running on Mac and you want to test on Windows, you can tell Xojo to do a remote debugging to a Windows machine. It'll run your app in debug mode on Windows, but you'll be able to interact with the debugger on your Mac, and vice versa, of course. You could run on Windows, fire off a Mac app, and then integrate, work with the debugger on Windows. And then here I can step through the code. Actually, I want to do a step in, and then I can step through it line by line, or I can just continue. So it's very handy, particularly if you are building cross-platform apps.
Right, and a lot of Xojo developers, myself included, so I'll run, for instance, I'm developing on Linux, but I'll run Windows in a virtual machine. So my remote debugger is from my host machine down to the child machine that's running inside of Windows.
Yeah, virtual machines are awesome and incredibly useful. I use them all the time on the Mac. I really like working off a Mac, unlike Kevin, mostly because I can have my virtual machines. I can run both Windows and Linux virtual machines on a Mac, in addition to having OS 10 available as the main operating system. So a little more convenient because I don't need a second computer.
Right. It's unfortunate that Apple won't let you run the Apple operating system in a virtual machine.
Yeah,
That's my response to you, Paul.
yeah.
There.
It's unfortunate they won't let you. It's not unfortunate, perhaps, that it often does work. But all right, let's see here if we got any other questions or things we want to address. We did mention that Xojo is, of course, object-oriented. Pretty standard stuff there. It's not like there's a unique flavor of the object-oriented capabilities that are in Xojo. It's very similar to standard object-oriented stuff you'd probably see, maybe seen or are familiar with from Java or C#. I'm not super familiar with the Visual FoxPro object-oriented stuff. Would you say it's similar as well, Kevin?
I would say in this case, this is where Visual FoxPro has kind of the edge. The concepts are the same, as that you can subclass controls and windows and so on. But in Visual FoxPro, when you subclass an object, you can see the subclass method, or you can see the subclassed events. And in Visual FoxPro, you also have a command called doDefault. So in a subclass, let's say you take a button and you subclass that button. In that action event, in the subclassed button, you can have code above it, and then you call doDefault, and then at that point, it calls the parent action event of the button. And then when that code is done executing, it returns control back to the child button, and then you can have code after that.
Sure.
So, okay, and I think you can do that in Zojo, but it's not quite as simple just by saying doDefault.
Well, if it's a method in Zojo, it's pretty simple because you would just call super something. Now
right.
that I'm spacing on it, but yeah, you can do that pretty easy with a method. With the events, they're not quite organized that way in Zojo, so it wouldn't be quite as straightforward, but certainly possible.
Right. And then the other thing is in Zojo, when you subclass the container control, you keep the inheritance of the objects within the container and their alignment and properties. But in Zojo, or I'm sorry, in Visual FoxPro, everything's like that. So if I subclassed the window and made the background blue and made it tall and thin, if I subclassed that subclassed window again, that subclassed window would be tall and thin and the background is blue.
Yes. So you're saying it has full, essentially, UI inheritance.
Right. Has UI inheritance. And then again, as you're adding methods, you can kind of see them through the IDE, what the parent methods are, and if you're kind of overriding them, replacing them, or kind of supplementing them.
Right, yeah. Zojo does not have UI inheritance. I remember that also from another tool. That apparently is not all that common these days, but back in the 90s, I used a tool called Power Builder that could also do that.
Right, yeah. Power Builder was another FoxPro competitor. Really great and powerful tool. Unfortunately, left by the wayside, like FoxPro has.
Indeed. All right, let's see. I'm scanning questions here.
Well, I'm looking on your screen, and over on the right, we see those checkboxes for 64-bit. Now, this is something I tell my FoxPro developer friends. I'm like, Visual FoxPro is 32-bit, and it will only be 32-bit. It will never be 64-bit. And that's kind of a wake-up call. And the world's going 64-bit, and the fact that Zojo is 64-bit is a huge plus. So you combine that and you say, well, the concept migration from FoxPro to Xojo is easy. And when you do that migration, you get 64-bit. That's an extra win that you'll never have staying with Visual FoxPro.
That's a good point. All right, one thing that also came up is people ask, well, where can we go for help? So I'm going to point out here the link and the Xojo Dev Center. And you can see here there's all kinds of stuff here. Let me actually shrink that so you can see everything. So there's a getting started section where you can quickly see some of the more introductory materials and how you can quickly get access to it. There's the user guide that's now available online and lots of stuff in there. And then also the full reference guide that has, all the Xojo language information and framework information for all the classes and things like that. And then we also have a very full resources section that contains all kinds of videos, including getting started videos on Xojo itself. So if you wanted to walk through a more detailed tutorial on how to build something, there's probably, at this point, we must be closing in on 80 different types of videos. Lots of community open source projects are noted in here, and lots of other things. So certainly a lot of time could be consumed going through the Dev Center and learning about all the stuff that is in Xojo. All right, let's switch back here. Speaking of resources, I got a few I want to highlight here. So there is a page. Now I'm going to go back to the Dev Center and highlight that. So I'm going to search here for FoxPro. And we have a page here, a very simple page that describes some of the things and how you can go between FoxPro and Xojo. This was written, of course, and provided by Kevin because, he's the expert on these things. And I'll be updating this after the webinar with links to his new open source tools. And this here is also the link to his Bitbucket page that has those tools up there. I think I only got one of the links, but you click there, you'll get to both of them. And I also need to remind everyone that Xojo every year has a developer conference, the Xojo Developer Conference, or XDC. And 2016 conference is in October this year, and registration is now open. And actually, it is right now, the month of February, is our call for speakers. So we are requesting topic and session submissions from people that might be interested in presenting at XDC. We've gotten a lot already, and there's still a couple weeks left in the month, so should be great. And that's where you can find out more about XDC. It's in Houston, Texas this year.
Yeah, I talk up the conference a lot on what a great opportunity it is to talk with Jeff Perlman and Paul and all the Xojo engineers, and that that resource is immediately available to you is a wonderful thing and wonderful opportunity that you get at the conference.
It's great. We love talking with all the customers that show up, and that's one thing that's also important to bring up is we like to think that Xojo has an absolutely wonderful developer community. And one other place where you can start to meet and hang out with those people is at the Xojo forum. That's forum.xojo.com. And you can sign up here, and you can see a very active forum with people that are polite and helpful. It is somewhat unusual in the world of development forums. So definitely something to check out. And of course, you want to head on over to Xojo.com, click the download button, and grab Xojo for whatever operating system you want to use and give it a try.
Yeah, the one last thing. So you touched on the developer .xojo.com. You talked about the forum, and then the last amazing resource is the hundreds and hundreds of examples. We showed the Eddie's Electronics, but there's just wonderful examples to help you get started with Xojo, and that's wonderful for somebody that's just getting started in a different language.
Yeah. Like I think I mentioned that way at the beginning. We've got last I counted, it was a little over 350, but I bet it's closer to 400 now. I need to probably count them again. I have an app I wrote that counts all the example files that are in the folder. But yeah, there's a ton of examples. I primarily put together all the examples, and often I'm watching the forum and seeing the type of questions people ask, and I'll be like, you know what? You should have an example on that. That would be useful to people, and we'll make one up. And it'll show up in the next release. And since we do releases pretty often, quarterly, the examples get updated very frequently. And just as a little bit of a teaser, the first release of 2016 is expected to be adding high DPI features to Xojo. That's features that you may have heard called Retina, but essentially allows for super slick, sharp-looking user interfaces on those super high-resolution screens. So stay tuned to see that come out in the first quarter, I would expect. All right, well, I think, Kevin, we went through quite a bit of stuff, and I want to thank you for taking part in the Xojo webinar.
Happy to do it.
Awesome. Well, I know you're quite the expert in this stuff. You've been using Xojo for many years now, and FoxPro for even longer, and it's great to have someone who has experience in both talking about them to help people out. So as you can see here on this page, we've got some contact information. By all means, everyone is always welcome to contact me, paul@xojo.com, if they have any questions about anything Xojo related that I can help you answer. I can't, of course, write your code for you, but I can probably point you in the right direction. And I know Kevin loves getting questions and helping people out when they're asking, why should I use Xojo? Why should I move this project from FoxPro? He's got the answers. So you can also reach him there at his email.
Yeah, I'll tell him the straight up, my straight up opinion.
Awesome. That's what we like to hear. All right. I guess that's it. So I want to thank everyone for attending. Have a great day.